Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat. I am your host. For today's episode, we're going to talk about how you shouldn't choose someone who turns you into a person that you don't want to be. And this can happen a lot in relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever. We tend to chase people and choose people who turn us into a version of ourselves that we don't like. And that's really important to not fall into because it changes your character, it changes who you are, and then it makes you lose trust with yourself. So in terms of a relationship, like a romantic relationship with somebody, to have to force yourself to be a person that's different than who you are authentically in order to make it work. Maybe you have to be over accommodating to this person. You have to bend yourself backwards to make them feel comfortable all the time in order to then be chosen by them as well. You are now acting not like who you are. Especially if this isn't who you are, right? Some people are fine with that, and that's great. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's about what's right or wrong for you. But if you are not like that, if it does not feel natural for you to do that, if there is no flow in a dynamic like that for you, you have to stop choosing people like that. Now, obviously, easier said than done. And it's not to say that this person is bad inherently or malicious in any way. Sometimes we are with people who are just very different from us, and they are on different paths, and they are veering off into another direction, and we're going in another direction, but we don't want to accept that, right? We would rather be comfortable, safe, try to make it work as much as possible. And when that happens, when we are very dead set on making it work with somebody, despite how they are making us change in order to match them, to follow them down their path, we lose our self-trust. We start believing that we don't even know who we are because we're not this kind of person. And then we start doing things and acting in ways that are not aligned with our values, maybe our morals sometimes. And then you start being a person that you don't even like. You don't even like being who you are, but you think you have to be that person in order to make it work with this specific person. And that's not healthy for you. It's not good for you. And I think part of the narrative here is, when we think about like the idea of the one, or when you decide on a relationship, you have to make it work and stick with it no matter what. And if it does not last forever, then it is a failure. And I really disagree with this. Of course, everybody's entitled to their own beliefs. Obviously, this isn't me disparaging them. I just disagree with them because I think it can be very dangerous to your sense of self and self-worth to adhere too closely to these things. Obviously, when it comes to a relationship, yeah, you do have to put work in. It's not super easy all the time. It's not, effortless. There is effort involved, and you do have to make it work. You do have to, step out of your comfort zone. You do have to, be more vulnerable, do things that make you uncomfortable sometimes, but within your values and morals, like I said. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that you shouldn't be putting effort in to make it work with somebody that you really care about, that you see a future with, that you think, person's great for me. This person's so aligned for me, and I have to sometimes put my ego away, or I sometimes have to step out of, my normal comfort zone and communicate better, whatever. Of course. You have to do that in any kind of relationship, but especially a romantic one. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I do think that there is this belief that you have to make it work no matter what, or else it's a failure. Like, you have failed. And if you are with somebody, it has to take you to the end. You have to take this relationship to the grave with you. And honestly, some relationships do last forever, and that's great. And some don't because they're not meant to. Because you are on different paths and you move in different directions. And you shouldn't have to force each other to be on the same path if it's not aligned, if it's not natural. Everybody changes. And that's a good thing, right? We do want to change in a way that is authentic to us. And obviously it's sad. It's not fun. You do have to let go of people and things. You have to let go of potential. You have to let go of what you expected to happen in life. And that's part of the journey. And I know that's the hardest thing to accept about relationships and how we shift and how our identities change and how we relate to each other after years, right? That's really, really difficult. But you have to let go of the people that force you to become a person you no longer are, especially if that person is not someone you like being. Now, if it comes to friendship, right? You might have started a friendship when you were in your early 20s, for example, or teenage years, whatever. And as you get older and you grow, you still connect with this person, you still enjoy their company, but maybe over time you notice that you are changing, you are more interested in different things, your self-discovery, your self-awareness, whatever, is becoming more expansive. You want to grow in that direction, you want to expand, and maybe they're not as interested in that. And maybe some of their behavior is very tied to who they were years ago. And, for them, they haven't changed, and they don't plan to, and they're not interested in it. And they relate to you on that same level as they did years ago. But you might not feel like that same person that you were years ago. And that's okay. Because people grow, people change, or they don't. And that's okay too. Like, there's no right or wrong here. I'm trying to emphasize that. I don't want to put the blame on another person for not growing with you, or somehow they're flawed or wrong. Everybody's different. But let's say you don't feel like the person you were years ago, the person that aligned really well with this person. And now you are adhering to an identity that they need you to adhere to in order to make this friendship work. You are stifling yourself, you're holding yourself back, you're staying in this identity, this bubble of a person you were years ago that you no longer connect with. You aren't that person anymore. And maybe you did things back then that maybe you weren't quite proud of, or the way you spoke wasn't something that you liked, or the things you said, or whatever. The way you saw the world is not something you're interested in anymore. But you have to take yourself back to that place in order to relate to this person. That's not good for you. And I know it's sad to think that you have changed directions with somebody that you were once so close with. There is a level of grief there that you have to kind of work through. But either way, you're going to have to sacrifice something to make it work. You either sacrifice them and the friendship you had that no longer is serving you, or you sacrifice yourself and your self-worth and self-trust. There's going to be a sacrifice no matter what. And I think it is important to sacrifice the other person in this scenario, because to sacrifice yourself, you are the only person you really have. And if you can't trust yourself to do what you know is aligned for you, that makes you feel like the kind of person you really want to be, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. That's going to be something that's really difficult to undo if you do it for too long. And I say this from my own experience, and after a time you start resenting yourself, and you end up resenting that person anyway. So the relationship doesn't work either way. So, it's not good for anybody afterwards. You're trying to do something that you think will sustain a relationship, that will be good for everyone, that, maybe you just need to suck it up or whatever. At the end of the day, it's not going to be good for anybody. Nobody's going to like being in this relationship. And yeah, it might be familiar, it might be comfortable, it might be safe, but it's not actually right for you. And it's very difficult. It's obviously easier said than done to accept this. But if you notice yourself being turned into a version of you that you don't like just to be around this person, then it's time to consider what the next steps are with this relationship. And again, I want to reiterate that it's not that this person is forcing you to be somebody. And it's not that you have to put this blame on them that they are somehow flawed or wrong. You're just different. You're on different paths now. And in order to stay on their path, you have to be who they are. But maybe who they are is not who you are. It does not mean one person is right or wrong, good or bad. You're just different. And maybe who they are is just not who you want to be. It's just not what's aligned with you. It's not the kind of person you see yourself as. So to be on that path would be to be putting on a different identity. You would have cognitive dissonance all the time with who you are as a person. And that's not easy to experience. It's not easy to go through. And I know sometimes it's very difficult to let go of people in your life that you've had for so long, especially if you fear, particularly with romantic relationships, if you fear not being able to find it again. Not feeling worthy of having it again. Feeling like, what if this was the only person I could have? Or this was the one. This person is the one for me. So I have to make it work. And again, that's why I don't quite like the narrative of the one. People are allowed to believe whatever they want. So I'm not trying to disparage that. But I don't believe it because it keeps you in situations that just might not be right for you. But because there's this title of it's the one. I've decided preemptively that this is the person I need to be with forever, despite how different we are now, despite how much we're changing, how much we're growing apart. They have to be the one though. I have to make it work. That's not good for you. And you, at the end of the day, are the one that's looking out for you the most. You have to be the one that's looking out for you the most. Yes, you will have people in your life that look out for you too, of course. But if you are finding yourself being a version of you around a person that you don't like, then that is not good for you. And you have to look out for yourself. You have to be there for yourself. You have to have your own back, and you have to know that you have your own back to make decisions that are difficult because they're what's right for you and what's good for you. You have to be able to do that, or else your self-worth will just disintegrate. And when you have no self-worth and self-trust, you will end up being in these relationships over and over again, and then just continue to perpetuate that cycle, that continue to validate the belief of, I can't trust myself. I'm not worthy. So you have to do the hard thing. You have to rip those band-aids off. And I know it's not easy. It's very difficult. And again, it's not to say that one person is good or bad, right or wrong. We don't have to blame anybody. It's just you have changed. And that is ultimately part of life. So if you catch yourself feeling this way, really consider reevaluating what's going on here. Is it that you maybe, should be trying a little bit to connect more with someone. Maybe you've let go of some things. Maybe you haven't been doing your best to communicate, be vulnerable, whatever. Sure. Yeah. Hold yourself accountable when necessary. Totally. But also be honest with yourself. Be honest about what this dynamic is now and if it's still aligned with where you want to be and how you want to grow. And if it's not, that is also really important to accept. And it's difficult. It's not easy. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of grief. But ultimately, it is the healthiest thing for you. And you have to look out for that for yourself. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. If you want to talk with me one-to-one about these things, feel free to book a call. As I always say, I'm not a therapist, of course. If you want to read about these topics, I write over on my Substack. And you can follow my other social media accounts for all of my other content. Other than that, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.